Welcome back, listeners. My guest today is Deepika Nayyar, the Network Manager over Pharmacy Quality, Compliance, and Accreditation at Hackensack Meridian Health. Welcome to the show, Deepika.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here. You are a pharmacist who has several regulatory responsibilities around all things pharmacy, diversion, medication safety, and compounding. You
Correct.
started the diversion program, I believe, at Hackensack Meridian, right? Okay. Were you hired specifically to start the program, or were you already in your current compliance role and then realized you needed a diversion program?
Sure. So at HMH, when I was hired for regulatory compliance role, we discovered that we needed a formal drug diversion prevention program.
Okay.
All my sites did have diversion prevention activities that they were doing, but we needed something system wide, consistent oversight, network governance, which was lacking.
Okay.
So my approach was to, get the key stakeholders lined up to discuss what was needed. I got risk, compliance, human resources, nursing leadership involved, established a charter, then a steering committee, and from there we established a multidisciplinary larger prevention committee, and then local drug diversion response teams.
Okay. So, what contributed? Did something in particular contribute to the realization that you needed a program, or was it just key stakeholders and yourself recognizing that we've got different things going on in different locations and we really need to systemize the approach?
The second one, nothing
Okay.
fast happened. It was because
Right.
our network was pharmacy network was new. We were already harmonizing several things across the network, and one of the things that we
Okay.
discovered was we don't have a harmonized diversion prevention program.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So you mentioned you got the key stakeholders, risk, and stuff involved. Thinking back to that development, give us a little bit more detail about how you approached that with each site having a little bit of something, but nothing standardized.
Sure. So first, one of the things that I did first was trying to understand what was the status of each site, conducting a comprehensive assessment on what things each site was monitoring. Did they already have a diversion surveillance program?
Sure.
Were there manual audits? Were they looking at specific reports? And if there were to be a diversion, how were they investigating it? Did we have a formal process, or did we meet as needed? Came up with the process, were they reporting, how were they reporting, and all of that. Once I had a better understanding of what the current processes were, then I met with the pharmacy directors at each site to establish some common grounds on things that we wanted to monitor as a team going forward, things that were non-negotiable, like setting the standard, but also allowing some flexibility at each site if they wanted to monitor other things that as a team we couldn't monitor. One of the things that was important to me was to understand the culture, the workflow, and the resources each site has. Not everybody
Mhm.
has a one person, focused on drug diversion activities. At some smaller sites, each leader is wearing multiple hats. So it was really important to understand what resources that each site has. Once we were able to come up with some common ground, um, then like these are the 10 things or 5 things that we wanted to monitor. We were easily able to standardize it and develop that foundational framework.
Okay, that makes sense. And it's not a small feat to put everybody, in the same, and you're right, each place has different resources. Um, Tell us a little bit about your organization. How many sites are we talking about here? Are they all inpatient sites? Give us an overview.
Sure. So Hackensack Meridian Health, it's 17 different hospitals, which includes children hospitals, acute care facilities, long-term care facilities, you name it, pediatric hospitals, trauma centers, community centers, and we also have several, I think 17 and growing more, um, retail pharmacies, plus infusion centers. So a very variable system with very different processes. And like you said, it's not a small feat to harmonize all those processes.
Right.
So when I look
Right.
at, process for harmonization or standardization, it's in addition to the process, it's also about people and the culture, truly understanding the why. If I'm able to explain them the why, and then I think
Mhm.
we have a common ground, and they, from their perspective, I want to make sure that the goals, the cultures, the values that each side has, we are aligning with them as well. I'm not just bringing something to the table for the purposes of standardization. It's a true patient safety improvement, team member safety processes, um, strengthening the compliance, and increasing efficacies, not adding more work.
I love it. I love that. Yeah, you said a lot of really great things in there, understanding the why and not just increasing the work. It has to be valuable. It's not a checkbox thing that, well, you just have to do it. It's why are we doing this and making sure it adds something to it. Did you come up with I know each site maybe needs to do it a little bit differently. Did you land on any kind of magic formula for rollout of a new process, or is that individualized as well, depending on the location that you're rolling it out to?
Sure. I wish that I had a magical formula. Like I said previously, that we came up with 5 or 10 things that we all wanted to monitor. Having that standard, establishing few metrics that we all wanted to take a look at. Because if there is a DEA requirement on, let's say, X, we want to make sure that X is we are compliant with. If Board of Pharmacy has specific requirements, we want to make sure that we are compliant with. So as a part of the comprehensive assessments that I mentioned, one of the things we did that I worked on was making sure the team members are compliant, or our pharmacies are compliant with DEA regulations as well as Board of Pharmacy regulations, and identifying the gaps and making sure, if there were any gaps um, on the regulations as well as best practices, we close those gaps before we start monitoring um, the start monitoring or auditing. So
Right.
as a team, we came up with 5 to 7 things that we all wanted to monitor. We also implemented a drug diversion surveillance program around the same time, maybe 6 months into our program inception. So that helped because then we could align all our practices together.
Okay. You have outpatient pharmacies as well as inpatient. Have you found a lot of differences between inpatient and outpatient in terms of how you mitigate or monitor for diversion?
That's a great question. And absolutely, there are so many differences between
Okay.
inpatient and outpatient. When we look at procurement, making sure the person who is ordering the controlled substances is not the same person who is stocking the controlled substances, whether it's on the inpatient side or on the outpatient side. Do we have two-person dual sign-off on, when you're stocking? Do our invoices match what is stocked into the inventory? So those processes remain similar for inpatient versus outpatient. Resources might be different, but the process in general is the same. However, when you look at the workflow processes after the procurement and storage, completely different. On the inpatient side, we have automatic dispensing cabinets. Controlled substances are dispersed throughout the hospital. There are several users, not just pharmacy. There's providers, nurses, residents, trauma teams that might be accessing and administering the medications. So you have to take into account what their practices are. Are they following the waste processes, the return processes that we have in place? Are they documented so that we can easily find, or our systems are able to find the documentation, or do we have to dig into the paper chart to find out? On the outpatient side, one of the things that's important is making sure the prescriptions that we are receiving are for a legitimate purpose. And then, secondly, even though the team is smaller, that is touching the controlled substances or the ones that's dispensing, the amount of inventory that the retail pharmacies have is completely different from amount of inventory that outpatient has is different from the inpatient. On the inpatient side, we're dispensing from 1 to 2 tablets at a time or small doses. On the retail side, we might be dispensing 5 days, 7 days, or 30 days, or 90 days at a time. So the dispenses look different. If you miss a bottle, what's considered significant versus
Mm.
insignificant loss is going to be
Mhm.
based on um, the inventory that each site has. So we had to establish some of those rules in place. On the outpatient side, I think one of the things that we really wanted to make sure was if somebody overrides the inventory count, we have a proper accountability for that, proper reasoning. Is there like figuring out if there's a pattern of, X person is always changing the inventory for X drug or number of these drugs. So those things were very important to us. And we are continually updating our systems to ensure we are able to have proper analytics behind the scenes.
Okay. I think most pharmacists probably assume they recognize the differences between inpatient and outpatient. Was there anything that you were surprised to learn once you started digging in terms of how outpatient setting is different and needs different controls?
Sure. I have actually worked in a retail setting
Okay.
for a very long time when I was a student, intern, pharmacist. I did per diem on a retail side. So
Okay.
the process, it didn't,
You were familiar with it.
yeah,
Yeah. Nothing surprised you. Yeah.
nothing surprised me. But at the same time, in an inpatient setting, every controlled substance we counted to a tablet, whereas on a retail side, it's very different. The C325s might be dispersed throughout the pharmacy, not stocked in a controlled substance vault, which is not similar to an inpatient area.
Mhm.
So I think as you dig deep into it, you really have to understand each area's processes before we establish um, workflow for them or workflow for diversion prevention.
Sure. Very important in whatever setting it is. My experience is mostly with inpatient, did a little bit of outpatient, but very early on in my career. So, for my sake, can you share some of the ways that you're monitoring the outpatient setting for suspected diversion, which obviously you've got, I mean, from a patient perspective, right? You had mentioned making sure it's for legitimate purposes. And so, diversion from a patient perspective, but also from then an employee perspective, what kinds of things are you doing that's maybe different in outpatient that takes a different lens than inpatient?
Sure. So procurement is going to look similar to the inpatient side, making sure the two-person process is in place, and we have at most of all our sites, and then really identifying if what inventory management software each site has or as an institution we have, whether it's a EMR software versus another software that we are using. If I have 100 tablets, again, giving an example of oxycodone in stock, probably very low for a retail pharmacy, but let's say 100 tablets in stock, and every week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, somebody's changing the count. So that becomes a pattern. Why are we changing the count? Are we just counting incorrectly versus something else is going on? I think that requires anytime somebody changes a count, it need probably would
Mhm.
we have a process in place where you would need a proper thorough review that the change makes sense. Could be just miscounts versus something else going on. If somebody's voiding the transactions, are there activities after hours? Or, if there is a pattern of activities outside the normal dispensing patterns. So those are the things that we look into on a regular basis. Um, Also, camera surveillance is another one. Making sure all retail pharmacies have camera surveillance is really important to me.
And I would think too, if time allows, monitoring those camera surveillance on a proactive rather than just a reactive, right? If something is happening, might give you a little bit of insight as to "Well, something looks funny here, but it's finding the time to monitor the camera, obviously.
Agreed. Agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree. It's always a time constraint. And then, the other important thing is that do do team members in general have tools that they need if they do see variations in
Mhm.
activity. That was one of the things that were really important to us. So we have several tools in place where a team member can report whether they want to report it anonymously or share their name. They can report it to their leader or the corporate office or the compliance line if they share any, if they're not comfortable with sharing directly with the leader.
Yeah, that it in a retail setting, it turns it into more of like what we think about on a nursing unit, right? It's your peers that you work with and you don't want to accuse anybody and what's going on. Obviously, that is the same for an inpatient pharmacy, but I think it's easier to look out from the inpatient pharmacy and the problem is out there with the nurses, right? We pick on the nurses or it's in the OR. And so there's maybe less introspective look within the inpatient pharmacy because there is so much on the outside. But retail, that's it. You're the unit. And
You're one team, so you don't
yeah,
want to report your team member, but at the same time, if something doesn't sound right, with
right,
the all our team members have the tools in place to share, and they may not say, it's not, it could not, it won't, may not be a diversion. It could just be something doesn't sound right. Can you take a look?
right, right. Yeah. Now, I believe your institution monitors for diversion of non-controlled substances with potential for abuse, right? And
Correct.
that's not easy with software. If you
No.
have software, that's not easy. What kinds of reports can you share a little bit about how you make that happen with the non-controls?
Sure. Again, I want to say that that's a challenge in general, not just for our institution, for
Oh,
any other
absolutely. 100%.
institution. We have tried to implement several operational tools in place to mitigate this risk. One of the things is having count back for certain controlled substances,
Okay.
or non-controlled substances, I meant. So you don't have fully, not all the tools that you use for controlled substance monitoring. Just some of them could be count back, stocking it in a lidded pocket. So if somebody's accessing
Mhm.
it, you can monitor those reports. If we have, every 2 days we are replenishing, or every day we are replenishing a pocket, but it seems unusual that, I just filled it yesterday and now again I'm filling it again. If something sounds unusual, then we really look at the reports to see who accessed it, what happened. Um, and some of the
I I think that is a place for a huge gap within inpatient pharmacies where all of your staff needs to be on board with that. I'm filling this, because you may work one day and then you're off 2 days and then you come back and there's another pharmacy technician in the middle, but it's really getting that message out. How often is too often? What is weird? Closing that gap. I think that's a big potential gap.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think our team is good at is how often, if let's say somebody diphenhydramine, right? Sharing as an example, I stocked, they were supposed to be 25 in the pocket, counts as 25, but I only have 10. So really
Yeah.
looking at, if you're changing the count with a significant number, bringing it back to your leader. Hey, every time I'm filling the pocket on this unit, something doesn't sound right. And we have
Mhm.
those incidences where we have looked into it to see if there's an unusual activity happening. One of the things I think that you already mentioned is, maybe pitch for our vendors to um, kind of look into this area where they can evolve and bring more tools into the non-controlled substance area, because most of the monitoring route right now is manual, like team
Right.
member awareness and manual, which obviously, are going to have some gaps in place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's hard because the non-controls don't fall we don't have the same expectations from a nursing staff,
Yeah,
mainly because they don't have to waste it, right? If they use a partial, it doesn't have to be wasted. Are we really gonna count and have blind count for acetaminophen, right? That would drive them crazy. So, there's a few things, and so if the software is going to look at it, there are going to be exceptions, right? I don't want to have an alert every time somebody doesn't waste a
exactly.
diphenhydramine, but I want a way to be able to look at it to see who's removing it, to see if I can see if there's any patterns, right? So it gets a little, the software, the vendor has to be able to kind of be fluid with it and turn some of those alerts off, some of them on, and then we'll have a partial view, which is better than none, but not all of them.
Completely
So it
agree.
gets,
So I
yeah.
think one of the things where these vendors can develop in is if somebody's continuously overriding a specific pocket compared to their
Mhm.
peers. So rather than comparing it to themselves, compare it to the peer group and see if there's unusual activity, if there's somebody's conducting null transactions all the
Mhm.
time and the
Yep.
counts are messed up after they conduct a null transaction.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
we are humans, we can only do so much. If we had one person at the omnicell or at the ADC level every single time, yes, we would be able to recognize it, but we don't have those resources. And that's why we are looking for
Right.
these tools.
Right. Yeah, I agree. What other data points do you wish software vendors would incorporate into their logic?
Um, s- One of for me, I think where we struggle is null transactions and then discrepancies after that. None of the softwares have that. And even for and that's true for controlled substances and non-controlled substances. Some of the vendors, I think, even with controlled substances, the continuous infusions, I think they have hard time monitoring that. What's the
Yeah.
not taking into account total infusions, the volume versus volume based it. It's usually did they chart it or not chart it. But I want to see more than just charted or not charted,
Mhm.
which none of these softwares are able to do, unfortunately.
Mhm. Are you aware of any that do anything with pain scores or trends of pain
I
scores, not just
haven't
charting a pain score?
Yeah, I haven't seen it. Again, I have requested with the
Mhm.
vendors I have worked with. I have requested that really targeting, if let's say nurse A documented pain score of 3, and gave a medication appropriate for that score. Next time it was charted as 10, but patient's condition didn't change, patient didn't have any procedural
Right.
activity, like recognizing that pattern, that would be really beneficial. Like having that, like every time this team member works, the pain scores are higher, but every time another team member works, the pain scores are lower. None of the
Yeah.
softwares can do that. Again, that takes a lot of creativity. We don't want false positives either. So it's, recognizing the patterns rather than individual incidences, which
Yeah.
none of the softwares are able to do right now.
Yeah, it's a I mean, you would think the way AI is going, hopefully it will be soon, but even, a pain score was charted, but did it follow the order? It fell outside the order. Or I've seen where, and I don't think was a diversion thing, but it was just the way for the nurse to combine meds that they knew worked effectively. This was in a L&D, and they
Mhm.
would chart one pain score for one of the pain meds and a different one for the other that they gave at the same time. So you can't have a medium and a severe pain. The patient can't be in both, right? But the nurse wanted to combine them, which there technically was nothing wrong with it from a pharmacological perspective, but that's not how the order was written.
Yeah,
But she just charted the pain score to make it work, but you can't do that. And then also, not only does it match the order, but I've seen, and this is more as a manual look, right? I'm starting to look and I'm starting like, wait a minute, every single time this nurse charts, say a 7, and
yeah,
then the post is always a 3. It's like every single time. But it is kind of a sticky area because really they can chart anything that they want to chart. It doesn't mean it's accurate. So the only
exactly.
way to kind of identify it is a trend.
Yeah. One of the things
Yeah.
I think we have done is interviewed patients to see
Hmm.
have they received the medication that is charted. And that's
Yeah.
just a general practice, interviewing, asking patients how their pain scores are they getting better? There have been instances where patients said, we haven't received the pain medication yet. So,
Yes. Yeah. I think that is also a very important piece that a lot of institutions miss, maybe because they just don't have the resources to do it. But that's one of the things I always encourage them to do is to put in regular patient rounding. And by patient rounding, I mean not just is your pain being managed, but literally, I saw you received this. how did it work? And that's when amazingly, sometimes you hear, I didn't get that.
Yeah.
And that's the
Hopefully a rare
beginning.
instance.
Yeah, yeah. But I have heard the case,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, you
to
name
put
it, I
that
think
in,
we have
you're
seen and
right.
heard every single. Used to be
You're
that,
right.
oh my God, this isn't the news, will never happen in my hospital. Now you
Yeah.
name it, we have seen it.
Yes, yes. When we talked before, you also mentioned having software incorporate if a particular matrix drawer was accessed a higher percentage of time. Tell
Yeah.
me about that.
Sure. So, one of the things I want these vendors to look at for non-controlled substances, they may not be in a lidded pocket. When we try every single drug to be in a lidded pocket, sometimes the cabinet doesn't have that much room. So you end up putting in a matrix drawer with could be vials, could be tablets. So what I want the vendors to take a look at is if somebody's accessing a specific drawer all the time, but picking different medications. So let's say a drawer has lidocaine, acetaminophen, Tylenol, acetaminophen, Benadryl, 5 or 6 medications. Day one,
Mhm.
I select drug A, but my target is always drug B. Then I select C, but my target is always drug B. And having, I'm always accessing this drawer and my counts change for a specific drug. Even though I'm selecting lidocaine, my count for Benadryl has been changed. Like having
Right.
that pattern recognition, I don't know if
Sure.
these softwares are smart enough. Again, we would need AI to really build in
Yeah.
that area, but I haven't seen any of the programs do that currently.
Yeah. And then when you see that the pharmacy, like the count reads 20 and the pharmacy reads it as 2, and they've just replaced it for a particular drug,
Yeah.
tying all of that together. Yeah. I'm sure AI surely can do that,
I hope
right?
so. I mean, in the next few years, I'm hoping that, all these programs are more robust in this area.
Yeah. Although it's talking out loud about it, pharmacy moves their inventory around sometimes to accommodate pockets. So then that would be a whole nother layer on top of it if you're constantly moving your inventory um, to accommodate things in your
Yeah.
drawers as
That,
you add or remove. So thinking that through too.
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you're a pharmacist that oversees regulatory compliance with med safety and compounding.
Mm.
Do you think that you approach diversion from a different perspective when it comes to improvements because you have that broader scope and responsibility? And I'm assuming your brain, thinks in a particular way.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good question. As a medication safety leader, I think we are trained in a way to look at human factors, processes, things that would contribute to an issue rather than looking at just the individual incident and blame,
Mhm.
like having a blame game, really understanding the contributing factors. Is it a system issue versus, non-compliance with the policy? And our if our policies are set appropriately versus we are setting our team members for failure. I think those things
Agreed.
are all important. So when I look at diversion cases or suspected diversion or implementing prevention practices, I take a system approach to really understand what the human factors are in place.
Mhm.
Obviously the goal is to strengthen our current practices and have those redundancies in place to prevent diversion. So taking a
Yeah.
system approach, and not focusing on the individual incident. If it's a true diversion, obviously they're reporting requirements, so you do end up focusing on individual incidents, but post the incident you have to look at it as a picture as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was very enlightening for me when I got more involved with medication safety as in my role as medication safety officer. And I did look at all of the errors. I tried to dig down instead of just assuming, oh, well, that was a one-off. I learned so much from looking at every single individual, some small things, some big things, but it was really enlightening and gave me a completely different perspective into the whole movement, medication management.
Completely agree. If we one of the things I have learned personally is it's the people, not just the processes.
Mhm.
If our concern is drugs are not being returned appropriately or in a timely fashion, or not being returned or not being wasted, talking to the nurses and really understanding what issues that they are encountering, because everybody comes to work to do the right thing. Like, are we giving them appropriate tools? If patient room is here, but like patient room is like here, but the waste bin is I don't know, several
Way
blocks
down the
away.
hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
way down the hall.
Yeah.
Are we going to have compliance? Probably not. You know,
Right.
like
Yeah.
having,
And
or if there's only one automatic dispensing cabinet and there's a long line, are we going to have compliance? These are practical
right.
issues. I don't know if we have figured out a best way, but we are working through it.
Right. Yeah. I saw in one facility, it was simple as the workflow, the policy was waste before you leave the room, but there weren't waste bins in every room. So there's no way they could possibly do it.
Yeah.
And so that's a very, very simple example that we just kind of take for granted. But unless you're really having those conversations and walking the floors, and you may not even realize that the policy is not being followed, right? So that's a whole nother thing. You just write it and then you publish it and then you expect it to just happen. But
Yeah.
meanwhile, they have not been set up for that success.
Yeah. So one of the
Yeah.
things that we have done is, connecting with our frontline team to really understand the vulnerabilities that they are going through. When we
Mhm.
were implementing the program, I went to several local nursing meetings, the site-specific nursing meetings,
Mm.
to really understand, one, explaining them the why we are implementing this program, and then getting the feedback, the issues that they are encountering, and as a team, we have been working on resolving them all along. It's not easy to add another automatic dispensing cabinet, space issues, capital issues, and all of that. But can we have other processes in place to ensure compliance? And we did implement several of them to that point.
Yeah, great. As we wrap it up here, do you have any suggestions for listeners who oversee the current diversion program for an organization that has different processes throughout their organization, but recognize the need for consistency? How should they approach the systemization of their program?
Again, a great question. I think the first thing is to acknowledge that there are always going to be variations.
Okay.
Um, that is your starting point. Variation is going to be there, but the end state is harmonization. One of the things, like I said, implemented at HMH is having that shared governance network oversight involving the decision makers, involving who is going to be a owner of these processes, conducting assessments or a process map of where each site is and where they need to be, working with the team to establish goals, metrics, audit list. Um, if we work as a team, I think we get more benefit and more
Mhm.
buy-in rather than coming from the top and saying this needs to be done. And again, allowing sites to have some flexibility in things that they need to do based on their operational needs, but establishing the minimum standard or non-negotiable things. So, to summarize, allowing some flexibility with standardization, shared governance, and conducting the process map to understand where sites are and where they need to be.
Great. That's I have nothing to add to that. I think that was great. And it sounds like HMH is very fortunate to have you overseeing all of these programs for them. You've got a very great understanding of the overall picture, and it sounds like your team is doing some great things.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time today, Deepika.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.